everyone, welcome to the Miss Texas Show. This is a show where we showcase stories of our victims, survivors from domestic violence, human trafficking, sexual assault, and other violent crimes. In this show, we also bring our community leaders to share resources with our community as well as the impact that they are making in the community. We run this show in partnership with the National Chamber of Commerce, Veterans Chamber of Commerce. The segment Military Time, we invite military and veterans who would like to share their stories with us. We also run this show in partnership with Hope PYX Global. It is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that fights against sex trafficking, domestic violence, and sexual assault. We will be linking the information in the content section below of the website of these organizations. If you would like to be part of this show, you can reach us via Facebook, Miss USA Texas, it's MS USA Texas, or you can email us with the same name, missusatexas at gmail.com. Now, without further ado, today we have a very special guest here, Miss Jane Edwards. Welcome, Miss Edwards.
Thank you. It's really great to be with you today, Aileen.
Thank you so much for being with us. Miss Edwards is the founder and president of Paving the Way Foundation. It is an organization that is a fierce disruption in the cycle of child trafficking around the globe. She has also been on many of the shows such as CNN, NBC, Marie Claire, and Epic Times. And she has made so much impact around the globe on this topic. She talks about different topics regarding child trafficking. But this show, we're gonna focus on the trafficking 101 for some of those who does not know what human trafficking is. So welcome again, Miss Edwards, for being on the show. Now, maybe I'm gonna pass the mic to you because you have so much
Okay.
achievements of what you do. Tell us a little bit about you, about your organization, and we'll go from
Sure.
there.
Sure. So we've been doing this since 2013. So we're going into our eighth year, which is pretty exciting. And this started on a journey I took in 2013. I was invited to the Get Health Summit at the UN. And there I met an extraordinary man by the name of Dr. Mahari. And you know how you meet people and you're like, I gotta talk more to that person. There's just like that connection. Oh, that's kind of what we had. We just chatted, exchanged cards, and exchanged some emails. And I was really looking forward to talking to him and learning more about his organization, which is called People to People. And they gather the diaspora of Ethiopia to help and make a difference for orphans there. And we're trying to connect, and he said, "Well, gosh, Jan, you know what? I'm going to Ethiopia next month." And I'm like, I send an email. Great, have a great time. Send pictures, right? Let me know when you get back. He sends me an email right back and says, "Do you want to go?" Well, it's not every day you get invited to go to Ethiopia,
I
okay?
know.
So I went. And that's where I learned about human trafficking. We were, on a mission trip, as a medical mission trip, and we're driving home. And um, it was just a moment in time. There were two older men, two younger women, and it just didn't feel right. That gut instinct that a lot of people talk about just didn't feel right. And so I was like, all right. So when I got to my sponsor's house, both he and his wife were physicians, I said, I shared with him what I saw, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, that's human trafficking." Like, "Oh, let's just go have a cup of coffee." It was so nonchalant
Yeah.
about it, and I was like, "Hang on a second." I said, "Are you?" My brain couldn't quite grasp it. I go, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Jan, Ethiopia has 4.5 million orphans. Because we're the number one source of human trafficking in the Middle East."
Oh,
And my brain was still trying to wrap its mind around it. And I said, "Hang on a second." I said, "Are you telling me people are selling people?" He's like, yeah, like, where you been? He's like, Jan, this is $150 billion industry. I was like, oh my God, I had no idea. I live in the happiest place on earth. We don't talk about stuff like this. So I came home and I started to do some research, and I found out that Florida has the third highest number of calls to the National Trafficking Hotline, only behind California and Texas. So it goes California, Texas, Florida, right? And I was like, all right, Ethiopia, I'm coming for you. And I got to fix my own backyard first. And that's really how our organization started. We really wanted to go after and have conversations with parents. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. So I said, fine, not a problem. You don't want to talk about it. I'm going to go talk to your kids. So we've now educated over 14,000 youth and adults in the past 4 years, and making that kind of impact on the ground level. And I got to tell you, now parents are starting to come around and they want to learn about it, especially in this environment where online exploitation has exploded, really in the past year. So we take our job very seriously, and we're on the prevention side, which I think is imperative. When I first started out and I told people we were going to do prevention education, they all thought I was nuts. And they all said, well, what about survivors? And what about this? And what about the in-between? I said, all very important. I said, but I'm a business person and I think that way. I think problem solving. Let's get to the root. Let's cut this off at the knees. Let's have our kids not be lured into this. Let's have our parents be educated and our teachers. And sure enough, 4 years later, prevention was the hot topic, and and here we are, which is great, because the more people that are having these kinds of conversations, the more kids we can save, and the bigger difference we can make.
I totally agree. This is the entire purpose of this show is to be a platform to bring awareness and then prevention for such a horrible crime,
Mm-hmm.
really, because like you said, this is happening in our backyard. And as
Mm-hmm.
you all know, that January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And like Jen and I, I think I had a similar experience because, when I first got into this, I did not know what is going on, and we used to think like these were people being smuggled, and we all had the
Mm-hmm.
confusion in the beginning. I thought smuggling is human trafficking, but the difference is the coercion part. And
Yes.
so we just thought, I thought it was all the foreigners like being trapped in a little dark place, and being sold from the container and that kind of situation, but that is not true at all. And this happened to everyone, regardless your race, your age, your gender, nationality, social and economic status. And this is
Mm-hmm.
what kind of first brought me to attention to about this crime. But the number is so shocking from the business standpoint of view, like you said, $150 billion. And
Mm-hmm.
totally I agree that trying to cure the root is the way to do it. Because we
Absolutely.
can
Well,
be like like you said, everything is important, but
mm-hmm.
if we don't cure the root, we're just gonna be spending a lot of money, effort, resources trying to help the people, the survivors, and this will never come to an end.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, so
Mm-hmm.
tell us more about your journey.
Sure. So, I want to go back to something that you said about the coercion, right? Human trafficking, we're going to just kind of get a baseline what human trafficking is. For adults, force, fraud, or coercion have to be involved. Okay. Now, the challenge with adults is mostly they don't know their victims. Okay. Two, they've been convinced that they chose this life. They've been convinced. So when they don't think they're victims, two, they think they chose this life. And three, there's the shame and embarrassment and guilt on the survivor side, on the victim side, right? Because they've been convinced it's their fault. They don't want to talk about it. And then the trafficker and the perpetrator uses that guilt, shame, and guilt, right? And embarrassment and uses that against them. And that's where the manipulation and the threats come in. Now, with children, anyone under the age of 18, that's not necessary. That's not needed because we're clear that an 18-year-old and under, I would assert from 25 and under, but we're clear that a child would not choose to be raped 15 to 25 times a night.
Right.
No one would choose that. No one willingly choose that. However, if someone thinks that's their only way out, if someone thinks that that's all they deserve, if someone's been blackmailed or manipulated and they're petrified of their parents or their friends or their family finding out, then they're going to be subjugated to that, right? And so that's the thing is human trafficking. Yes, smuggling is involved. Yes, people come across borders. Yes, people are flown in for sure. That's part of it. But mostly what you and I are talking about is the intentional recruitment and grooming of people right here in our backyard. You know, the FBI did a survey of 1.2 million runaways. Over half of them, over half, said they traded sex for food, lodging, or transportation. That's trafficking.
Yes, you talk about grooming. So tell us a little bit, our audience, about, what grooming is like. Because, again, a lot of the misconception, including myself, in the beginning, we think it's like in a movie. And you see all
Mm-hmm.
those people like muscles and the beard and tattoos, and men mostly, right? So
Mm-hmm.
tell us like what the pimp looks like, what grooming looks like.
Yeah, well, pimp can be anyone. It does just like the victims don't look a particular way, the pimps don't look a particular way. Percentage of pimps and perpetrators are women. Familial trafficking, meaning someone being trafficked by a family member, is close to 60% of human trafficking, which is why I believe we don't hear about it a lot. Because if a family member is trafficking you, as a human being, we have a basal need to be with our family. It's just inherent in our DNA. We're designed that way. And we see this with domestic violence, right? And abuse is, when they attempt to remove a child from the home, the child is screaming, reaching out for their parent because they don't want to leave their parent, even though they're being abused, you know? So there's a connection between that child and that family member, and they don't want to snitch on them. They don't want to get them in trouble, especially if it's your mom, and she's the sole provider and your mom's pimping you out. You're not going to tell anybody because it's your mom, right? So that's kind of the piece that a lot of people don't really fully understand is the impact that this has on people's psyche, people's mental well-being, and their brain development. So the whole force, fraud, coercion, being a family member makes it even worse because it's someone that's supposed to love you and you trust them.
That is terrible, especially as a child, you rely
Hmm.
on, you're dependent on your parents. And when your parents tell you that, it's cognitive, I understand, like, it's people think it's mental health, but it actually does physically does the do
Absolutely.
the cognitive damage to the brain. And
Hmm.
in addition to, it messes up people's like the entire trust system. Like, who can you
Hmm.
trust? If you can't trust your parents, who can you
Yeah.
trust? And that in turn, that's why a lot of the victims, they get re-trafficked, because
Hmm.
they they think, let's say, if a person gets out of the situation from their mom, and if it's a
Yep.
girl, they go to a guy, supposedly their boyfriend, and
Hmm.
that goes to the grooming part. So, tell
Hmm.
us like that, the
Sure.
false friend, how do they groom?
Yeah. Well, if it's a family member, that's probably pretty obvious, right? You're
Yeah.
um, and I don't know this, right? I don't have facts. So I'm gonna make sure it's stating this, but I have a funny feeling There's no grooming process. It's one day you're not being trafficked and the next day you are. I don't think it's an overtime phenomenon like it would be if you were being recruited from someone outside your family. Um, that being said, outside the family, grooming and recruitment, um, it looks a lot like dating. Now, what do I mean by that? You meet someone, you start texting, you start talking on the phone, maybe you start doing video chats, and then maybe you go out on a date, and maybe go out on another date. But between the first time you've met and all that video and texting and sharing and sharing and sharing and sharing, right? These kids have this, oh, I'm in love. He's in love. He loves me. It doesn't matter if he's 10 years older than me. We're in love, you know? And it's intentional and over time. However, given the environment we're in right now online, there was a little girl here in Orlando, 11 years old, that was groomed and recruited in 7 days on Instagram.
Wow.
And a 26-year-old man drove down from Georgia to pick her up. Luckily, they caught her and him before they crossed the state line.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
7 days
Yeah.
on Instagram.
7 days. Yep. So what used to take pimps months and perpetrators months to bond with a child, it now takes them days. And here's why. The thing that most parents don't really fully understand, and why I say it all the time, is their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. This front part of your brain is not fully developed until you're close to 25. And so when we say as parents, they should have known better, they can't. They don't know better, right? The should have, you got to remove the should have. They honest to God don't know, because the picture looks just like someone their age. They might talk to them. I mean, we could all work really hard and sound young. We could if we had an intention behind it. So you've got someone that's got a young picture. You've got someone that is a professional recruiter. And so they know exactly what kids are talking about today. They know exactly what kids are dealing with today. They know exactly the apps to be on. And so they're going to engage with them as a child would engage with them. However, their brain's fully developed. You're talking, 40, 50-year-old adults. And they bond with these children. That's why they call it trauma bonding. Trauma bonding actually takes 2 to 3 years to heal. So I think you're pretty. I think you're the smartest. Gosh, your parents, they don't know what they have, or your friends don't know what they have. You can trust me. They start to build this wedge between the victim and the rest of the world, being their one and only. Everybody wants to feel special. I want to feel special, and I'm not 14. You want to feel special. You're not 14. It's part of our human nature, and especially in the environment that's really been around, right? We're cut off from our friends, we're cut off from our family, we're cut off from the world, but we find solace online. And these perpetrators know that, so they build rapport. Because if you look at anyone's Facebook page, anyone's Instagram, anyone's Snapchat, you know what they like, you know what music they listen to, you know what their favorite clothing designer is, or whatever else. And people use that to bond with them over time. So now you've got this bond, you've got this relationship, and that's the grooming part. It literally is like dating. It looks like dating.
Yeah, it's
And then
literally like online dating platform.
It is. It literally looks like dating. And then they scoop them in, right? So now these kids think they love someone with their experience of love. It's a swath of chemicals wandering around, right? And then they start asking for pictures. Hey, just your bra. Okay, just your bra and panties. It's just like your swimsuit. Okay, take a picture of this, take a picture of that. And kids don't think it's a thing. They don't think it's a thing. I just saw a study a friend of mine sent me that kids don't think it's a thing. They don't see anything wrong with it. Everybody else is doing it. I don't get what the big deal is. Having no idea that once a picture leaves your phone, you can never get it back.
Right.
Having no idea that future employers future spouses, future in-laws, future college recruiters are probably going to see that picture. If it's not on your Facebook post, it's going to be on somebody else's. It's not on your Instagram, it's going to be on somebody else's. So that's that they don't have the capacity of thinking about long-term impact like we do. And so the moment somebody starts asking for that picture, but you're so beautiful, you've got such a great shape, oh, what great legs, oh, what great this, starts to have them feel good. And remember, this is the gangly age, 11 to 14 is the average age. Our bodies change a lot in those years.
Right.
They don't feel pretty and then they are pretty, right? Or they don't ever feel pretty. And here they have this cute boy engaging with them and they feel special. So they want to have that person feel special back. So they send a picture and then they send another picture. And then it gets uncomfortable. And they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. And the person's like, not a problem. I'll just post all your pictures in your social media. That's manipulation. That's threats. And because they're already bought in emotionally, they've already done something they knew they probably shouldn't have done. Right? Their parents have told them, don't send in inappropriate pictures. There's, conversations, don't send inappropriate pictures. And now here's someone's using that against them and they feel like they're trapped. And they don't feel like they can go talk to their parents because their parents would surely never understand. Their teachers surely would never understand. Their friends actually might even cheer them on. There was a little girl, I showed our film Trapped in the Trade at a community college a few years ago, and there's a little girl that came in about, I don't know, a fourth of the way through. She's about 7 months pregnant, sitting up front. And at the end, she was asking some really good questions, which kind of had my red flags going up, right? And so afterwards, she came up and she was talking to me. She's like, "Can we talk?" And I said, "Sure." And I said, let me go buy you some lunch. And first of all, she was very grateful, right, that I was there having this conversation with the kids. And she just looked at me straight in the eye and she said, "I just got out of the life." Anytime you talk to a survivor or anytime you talk to someone who's still in the life, you can't react. You can't be like, "Oh my God." It's just got to be, "I got it." You just listen. And she came over from the Dominican Republic at 16 because her mom had abandoned her, lived with her dad. Her dad worked all the time. And again, remember, this isn't developed yet. So in her 16-year-old brain, she thought, well, I should get a job, right? I'll help my dad. That way he won't have to work so much. So she's looking in the paper and found a, cocktail waitress job. Ended up being a strip club. When she walked in and applied, the owner said, you'll make more money up there on the pole. And money is what she wanted to make. So she started to strip. And about a month in, well-dressed man came in and started, gushing on her and said, well, if you want to make even more money, you should work for me. And he started pimping her out. Now, mind you, she's 16 years old. She got pregnant. He still sold her. And I said, well, what had you leave? What was it that had flipped that switch? And she said it was the second time he held a gun against her head. She said, I didn't want my child to grow up in this environment, so I left. I'm like, I got it. And in my head, my parent head, I'm screaming, going, where was your dad? Where were your teachers? Where were your friends, right? And I just looked at her, I said, where were your friends in all of this? I know my friends, my close group of friends, right? If I was doing something that I shouldn't be doing, they'd be like, stop, stay, wherever you are, Jan, we're coming to get you. They would pull me back from that ledge. Right. And so I said, where were your friends in all this? What did they say? And she said, well, shows they loved watching me roll up in my pimp's Mercedes. Broke my heart. So I thought that's what we're teaching our kids.
Wow.
And she said, as a matter of fact, shows all the football players used to make fun of their girlfriends, saying, you should do what she's doing and make some money.
Oh.
Yeah. I sat in my car and I cried for 45 minutes after that. Because it's like, if that's what our kids think, we're in trouble. Like, we're in trouble. And I get part of it societal. But for a 16 or 17-year-old to think it's okay to sell your body for money, there's some conversations we want to have with them. Like, a lot of college girls are using sugardaddy.com to put themselves through college. Like, do not get the oxymoron of that. Do not get the, doesn't match of who you are. And you don't think at some point in time this man's going to want something more than just your company? I don't know. Something for you to think about. And when people go, so how'd you pay for college? How are you going to answer that? And I get these blank stares, like they hadn't done all that thinking yet, right? And that's why this conversation is so important, is for women to really get that they have value and they are priceless and they are worthy. And your worth isn't determined by what car you drive or what guy you hang out with. And that's the gap we're trying to fill with our conversations and education, is educating people about what human trafficking is and what it looks like, the many facets, right? The labor trafficking, the agriculture trafficking, domestic servitude, restaurants, hotels, sex trafficking, those groups, the traveling groups that go sell the big tubs of, $5 candy and $5 candles. That's trafficking, right? We want to bridge that gap to educate people what trafficking is, how it operates, how these perpetrators operate, and how they get your kids and how they get your kids fast. That little girl was not going to be his girlfriend. That little girl was going to be pimped out. She was going to be raped. And she came from a good home. And that's the piece that people just can't wrap their mind around, is this is really happening literally in your backyard, literally down the hall. And so it's educating people on what it is too, and then really empowering them. Once you've got some knowledge, right? We've got some facts that I shared, and I've got a couple stories, all of which can be verified online. I don't share anything that you can't go out and share with your kids. And that's the thing that we invite parents and teachers and educators and pastors and youth leaders and Boys and Girls Club directors, for them to be educated so they can actually start these really easy conversations with these kids that they're responsible for. Be like, hey, I was listening to this podcast today. Did you know the average age of entry into human trafficking is 11 to 14? And the child's going to have one of two responses. Oh, yeah, I knew that. Really? Where'd you learn that? Because I had no idea. I just learned it today. Right? And then they're either going to tell you where they learned it, or then they're going to stumble over their words and you're going to find out they really didn't know that. They wanted to pretend like they knew, right? Or they're going to go, yeah, I had heard something about that. And then you can actually ask, well, what do you think about that? How do we stop that? How do we interrupt it? What can we do? By asking questions that have our kids think and have them do the looking is really what's going to make the difference. Because one, I don't think our kids do enough critical thinking. I don't think they're taught that. And because of everything that's happening out in the environment today, everybody's in reactionary mode. I just want people to pause and think and then react. Unless, of course, there's a fire, moments where you have to react immediately. But inside the domain of conversations about this topic, really stopping and thinking, because I promise, if any parent goes onto their phone today and looks up Ask FM or Hot or Not or Live Me, and you find all the other apps that go underneath that, you're going to be wide-eyed and shocked about what you find on these app stores. And you actually get to engage in a conversation with your kids. Going, guy, I was trying to download Snapchat, right? You can come up with whatever it is. Trying to download Snapchat. I was trying to do something on Instagram, and I came upon this thing. Have you ever heard of Calculator Plus? And your kids' eyes are either going to get super wide, like, uh-oh, I made, or they're going to know. No, I have no idea what that is. Well, I heard about it. We should go look this up. When you engage with your kids like that in a conversation versus accusatory, in an inquiry versus an argument, it actually opens up the space for them to come to you and share information. And that's really what we want to do, is we want to have parents create a safe space. So if something happens online, we educated about 350 kids in a middle school last year. And 2 weeks after our training, a little girl got a text from a number she didn't know that said, "I think you're really cute. I want you to send me a picture of yourself in a bathing suit," right? Or whatever, something inappropriate. And because of our training, she immediately knew to go to her parents. The parents called the police, and they also called the administrator. As far as I'm concerned, we just saved that little girl's life.
Absolutely.
And she goes and tells people about it. And that's the kind of conversations we want our kids to have. We want our kids to be educated so they can go to the parents. We want our parents to be educated so they're open ears and open eyes and hearts.
Yes, it's great that what you're doing. I think it's the prevention goes both from the kid side and the parent side. The kids are the one who are actually being coerced and being groomed, but the parents really need to keep an eye on them. So you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned about those platforms like Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, and LiveMe. So list a few of the other apps that parents can be watching out for.
Sure. Well, I have a whole list of apps on my parent toolkit that they can download, and you're going to put that in the content below.
Absolutely. We'll put it in the
Yeah.
content section below.
Absolutely. Well, people have heard of Grinder, of course, and Tinder. Those are dating apps. And, I don't really care how old your kid is, they can still download it, right? Um, Calculator Plus hides things. So it hides pictures, it hides other apps. And really, any gaming app would actually, in any game that's got a chat feature, put your kids at risk. So you want to either disable the chat feature or be sitting right there next to them. I was over at a friend's house, and she has 3 girls, 5, 9, and 11. Oh, 5, 9, and 13. And we'd all watched a movie, and then all the girls were like, "Can we play video games?" And she's like, "Sure." And they were playing Roblox. And the 5-year-old, she got so excited she was literally, her whole body was vibrating. And I'm like, that's a dopamine hit. And she, up in the little chat box, there's all these names. And I'm like, "Sweetheart, who are these people?" She's like, "I don't know. I don't know." She was 5 years old,
Mm-hmm.
11 o'clock at night, playing a video game on a phone with an open IP with a chat bar.
Wow. Five
Yeah.
years old.
Yeah. And how her whole body was reacting was like, "Oh, Mom and I got to have a conversation," right? So I went into the kitchen and I'm like, "So, do you know what your daughter's playing?" Not trying to be like, "Are you crazy?" Because that's what I want to do. It doesn't really work well. It's like,
Right.
"What are you doing?" It's like, and I'm like, did you know that?" And and this is she's an engineer, okay, super smart. And when I shared with everything she was happening, she's looking at me like, "Jan, I have no idea what you're talking about." I'm like, "Okay." And that's really where my parent tech talks were born. Out of that conversation is, I've got this friend whom I adore. Her 3 girls are incredible, single mom, right? And I'm giving her information she had never heard of before. And her kids are at risk. And she didn't know. I'm like, "The first thing I want you to do is turn off the Geo Locator so nobody knows where your kid is." I said, "And you got to turn off your Geo Locator when you're using apps too, because they can come find you. They'll know exactly where. They can look at your IP address and they can find exactly where you're at. It's not okay." And the other piece of it is knowing who your kids' friends are. One of the latest things is IBF, Internet Best Friend. So these are kids and people they've never gone to school with. And when you start to learn that strangers will start to recruit you by bonding with you, you know, I think it was like 30% of the kids we had trained stopped taking friend requests of people they didn't know. And it's the same thing in video gaming. They've got to not play video games with people they don't know. My daughter is a huge video gamer, and she and her husband now live in another country. And I'll never forget because I was sitting in the kitchen and her bedroom was up some stairs, and so you could kind of hear what was going on up there, and I'd hear her go, "Yes, I'm a girl. No, I'm not interested, and I'm leaving the game." You know, so here's this 18, 19-year-old girl being you know courted over video games because she could play video games well. It's crazy. We talked about all the other applications inside that space. If you have an Xbox, you have to go through 18 screens to get to parent controls.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
I'm not a video gamer, if I'm not technology savvy, my kids they got no shot because I have no idea how to keep them safe from that other than possibly turn off the internet at night, you know? So these are the kinds of things that parents have to start investigating and start looking at to really understand. I talk to parents. I said, it's not about being a helicopter parent anymore. It's about being a stealth parent, right? You're hovering and you're watching what's going on and you can swoop in when you need to because kids still need their space and we want to keep them safe. And how we do that is engage in conversations with them to really find out what's going on over there. Because when we got done with our training, I had 10 young boys delete Snapchat off their phone because they're like, I'm not being recruited. 30% of kids recruited are young boys. They're like, I'm not being recruited.
That is great. You talked about your daughter, how she stood up
Hmm.
in front of that stranger boy, whoever that
Hmm.
gender might even
Yeah.
be, trying to recruit her to the boys deleting the apps in front of you. That is the impact that we're making and we are trying to look for. And this is
Hmm.
awesome. And you talked about the conversations that the parents has with their children and the tactics that you use. I think this is very important as well, and we're gonna have another episode going into depth talking about this, and Jen is gonna share with more of the different the apps and the information about the conversation, how you go into where you talk about it, what you talk about, so that you can really apply those tactics. Because just like Jen said, this is happening in our backyard, and this is
Hmm.
happening to our children, and in this country, literally in our backyard. So we really need to keep an eye on for that. So with that being said, it's really great. Thank you so much, Jen, for all those great information. It's very sad that we have those big numbers, like you talk
Hmm.
about California being the number
Yeah.
one state in the numbers,
Hmm.
Texas, I'm here number two, and you're in Florida number three, and the dollar number $150 billion. This is really a business for them. So
It sure is.
how do we put a stop onto it by preventing and bring the awareness? So if you think this video is useful and informative, make sure that you share with other people and subscribe, and
Hmm.
make sure that you watch part two of this conversation, because this is going to be making a life change and impact.
Yeah.
And we're also going to be linking Jen's toolkit and information below about what's what the apps that we just talked about and the other kinds of good stuff that you can use so that you can study on. With that being said, Jen, do you have any takeaway for our parents, our audience, our kids, anyone who is watching for this part one of the
Absolutely.
video?
Absolutely. I always end with three things. One, share what you've learned today. It's a really easy way to start a conversation, and we can actually alter this one conversation at a time. The second thing is I want y'all to put the human trafficking hotline number in your phone. Really simple. It's 888 3737 888. And you can call it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They have access to 210 languages around the world. So if you see something, I want you to do something. Take that action and pick up the phone. It's all unanimous, all anonymous and unanimous, all anonymous. And you just call and tell them what you're seeing, and they'll tell you exactly what to do. And if something's happening immediately, like you see someone being stuffed in a car, you call 911 because the police are trained to handle this. Okay. So share what you've learned, put the hotline number in your phone. And lastly, get involved locally. January is Human Trafficking Awareness and Prevention Month, and y'all live in Houston, one of the top cities that are really taking on this battle. And Rotary has this is one of their missions. So Rotary always has events. I know United Against Human Trafficking, they've got events coming up, and we just invite you to get involved. And something as simple as sharing a post, something as simple as saying a prayer, and something as simple as making a contribution, because all of these 501c3s operate on contributions. So share what you learn, put the number in your phone, and go get in action. Go volunteer, pray, share, make a contribution. That's what I want people left with.
Very well said. Thank you so much, Dan. We're going to
Welcome.
put the information, including the hotline number, as well as the link for the United Against Human Trafficking and other events with the Chamber of Commerce, as well as Hope UX Global for January Human Trafficking Awareness Month events in the content section below. But thank you so much for tuning in. Once
Thank
again,
you.
this is the Miss Texas Show, and we'll see you next time. Thank you again, Jan.
Thank you.